Okay, all right. Thank you. Hi, I'm Amber Lancaster, and it is my pleasure to present to you a teaching practice that I have been using since 2011. It is called Screencasting in the form of writing feedback. But I want to share with you today this practice and perhaps something that you can think about in your own teaching practices and your own disciplines as a tool for providing feedback to your students. So just let me ask right quick as a show of hands, how many of you have heard of screencasting before? Just a couple of people. Okay, so first, before I get started, I just want to recognize CCT for this opportunity and say thank you for their financial support and making it possible for me to be here as an online faculty. It's a treat to come here and spend some face time with everybody. So we have a couple people online, and I hope that you can hear and you can see. We have confirmation that everyone's able to. Perfect. So in short, the concept of screencasting is to record what you're looking at in terms of a student's assignment on the screen and record your voice with strokes on the keyboard on the screen so that they can see what you're looking at, what kinds of concepts you want to provide feedback on, and give them ideas for how to improve your assignments, whether it's a writing assignment or if it's a graphical representation or perhaps even mathematical representations. Okay. So the use of the screen captured video will couple together the visual with the verbal information. And the concept then is drawn from two areas in my field. One is called a cognitive walkthrough. In psychology or usability study, the concept is to show somebody what the user, or in this case the viewer or the instructor, is experiencing while interacting with their work, with their ideas, whether it's a draft, whether it's a model, and exploring it in terms of design. The other concept that I draw from is something called reader response. In communication studies, English studies, this concept is reading a draft as an artifact and interacting with it, almost having a conversation with it. So you might be thinking about an idea that the student presents in the draft and having a response to it, like, what are you thinking here? And so that might be something typically in a written comment I would provide and ask for elaboration on. So we call it sort of an interview with the text, and it reveals my feelings of their ideas so they can kind of get a sense of where I'm coming from as a reader or somebody interacting with their document. I do have an example here, and I'm hoping that this, if I need to copy and paste it, I can do that as well. So I want to preface that this example is slightly different than, oh boy, let me pause there for a second. Slightly different than a student's draft that I would review. This is something that I did in a previous position at Writing Center, and I do have the graduate student permission to use this as an example. So let's see if we can get sound on this. Try it again. Here we go. It was working. It's not very loud. On the actual application of the two. Yep. Okay. So you can see in this example of the video, it's recording me talking as I'm walking through the students' PowerPoint presentation and offering feedback to the student about concepts like document design, layout, could also be elements of content in terms of arrangement, visual. So I'm giving the student feedback, and you can see here how it's recording on the screen if I grab something and point to it and talk about what I'm experiencing as a viewer. So I'm preparing the student for her dissertation proposal in which she would be presenting this to a committee. Okay, he's going to try to get.
Oh, that's so precise.
Okay, much better. Mm-hmm. So you get the idea. Okay. So the concept of showing and telling together and pointing out things for the student to see where you're looking at and what you're experiencing with their work really helps to reinforce the written kind of feedback that they typically get. So when I started this back in 2011, it was really an experiment in trying to see, what kinds of things students liked. It was one of the online classes I was teaching at a previous university, and I created the screencast using Camtasia, which was a software I had access to at the time, and sent the student feedback on a typical technical writing assignment, which was a resume assignment. And the student emailed me almost immediately after I sent it off and responded with this email. This is probably the most helpful feedback I've ever received on any assignment I've ever submitted in the history of my academic career. So it got my attention right away. I thought, oh my goodness. And I thought, well, what kind of feedback are you getting? I wanted to know. So this kind of started my exploratory process with researching feedback as a pedagogical practice. And what are we doing as instructors to help our students learn how to improve their drafts? Some other things I've done along the way. So I've continued to do this since 2011. And one of the things that I've done is I've put them up on YouTube, and you can create a channel for a student and then password protect it so that no one else has access to it. So I started by creating these channels, and again, what I found to be really interesting was almost immediately after releasing the information to the students, I got this kind of like, gratification back, sort of like, thank you so much, or this is so wonderful. So this is another one here. Thank you for your feedback. I found the YouTube video very helpful. I was able to fully understand all of your recommendations. I found that much more usable to me than strictly paper-based. I really appreciated when you provided multiple options to me, and that's a typo they had, for me to consider. I feel those suggestions will help me in the future with any writing assignment. So the other thing I started to notice in a pattern was not just a thank you, but it was sort of like soliciting more information. So it created a dialogue with my students. And when I was online doing my office hours virtual through Skype, I'd kind of hang out in there and I'd get people who would send me little messages on Skype. So this is one that said, I love the screencast. I felt like we were FaceTiming while you explained the revisions. Awesome. I can even watch it again if I need to. Fabulous. Slow clap. Thank you. Can you show me how you changed the template image that you mentioned doing for the background on the first slide? So again, there was like a follow-up dialogue about, you said I should do this. Can you show me how more, information about how to go and improve the presentation or the document. This one's one of my favorites. So I guess I was hanging out on Skype and the student logged on and said, I just watched the screencast. That's pretty dope. Pardon my use of the word, or really, that is nice. I completely understand where you are coming from. I was just worried that that it would overwhelm people. I was a little overwhelmed myself. You suggest taking out internship and placing that in the designated categories. So I'm online and now we're having a conversation about her document. So there are some concerns though, and these are things that I've learned over the years. If this is something you're thinking about doing, I think it's fair to say that there are pros and cons. First, there is a high technology learning curve for instructors. So if you've never done this before, have patience, and I would say carve out probably a little extra time to tinker and test it and see if it's something for you. There is increased time to assess students' assignment initially. So in order to do a screencast, you need to have read the document through one time, and usually I highlight something or I make notes of what things I want to say. So it's almost like grading twice, because then you have to go back and record it and then provide that information to the student. It can be less polished in terms of performance. I found early on that I wanted it to be perfect. So a cough or a sneeze meant starting all over. And I've gotten to the point where I allow those to be, human moments, and I'm a little more comfortable with that. But I think if you try to make it something where you think it's, a polished video that you would see almost like a commercial, that you'll probably never be happy with it. It's less ideal for writing and revising modeling of large text chunks or time-intensive tasks. So really thinking it in like micro feedback, you want to pick things that are going to be either the most important or the highest order of concerns, or you want to pick something that maybe is a pattern error. So some things I see, with grammar or structure, the sentence is awkward and I'm seeing the same problem over and over in the students' draft. I'd want to point out, this is the third or fourth time that you've done this kind of thing. So let's talk about it so you can spot it the next time yourself and make it better. Or it might be if you have visual components, if you're working with, in our field, for example, like document design elements, you want to show them how to use the tools in Microsoft Word because they haven't necessarily mastered those yet. So how to insert tables and how to insert graphs and how to manipulate text and white space and layout and design and so forth. So those are the kinds of things that I have used this tool for. I do think it's probably more ideal for a rough draft or feedback on those higher order concerns. I think the rough draft, the first time that they see this, they can really see what it is that the reader is experiencing, or the user if it's a product, and get a sense for what they should change. And so they take that information back to the next level, to a final draft or a final product. I think it's more ideal for creating a personalized experience with rich contextualized and sensory feedback. I have had lots of online students tell me after the fact that they really enjoyed this and have requested that I do it for all of the assignments. I don't do it for all of the assignments, I just do usually a few and give them different kinds of feedback throughout the course. Some have really liked this and found it to be, you know, their way of learning and to provide them with maybe an aspect that they're missing in an online class where they want to have, you know, some engagement with the professor, hear the professor's voice, see what I look like and how I interact with their work. So a call to research, I have a couple quotes up here that I have used in really guiding me in thinking about this from a pedagogical perspective. The first one mentions that screencasts were received more positively in the richer media of audio visual screencasting and that this may encourage emotions more conducive to receiving and processing feedback. So the idea of we all probably submit manuscripts and you get content back with, you know, cross and, you know, things that maybe are a little bit harder to accept. Sometimes having the voice and understanding that the criticism isn't as harsh necessarily as you think it is, I think is probably one of the positive aspects. Screencast to teach writing, particularly in distance courses, offers a kind of liveliness to engage with students in a more spontaneous way and deserves attention because it represents a promising component of distance learning in writing instruction. So for me, I have found this to be a way to connect with my students and allow for them to really see my perspective and how I'm viewing their writing. So where I'm at right now, I am working on a replication study here, and I started the study in the winter with the approval of our. And I had 4 lessons of composition technical writing. One was a technical writing, one was an advanced technical writing class, and I exposed them to different kinds of feedback with information. So the different kinds of feedback were different assignments. They received a whole list of feedback rubric. So an overview that says, you know, I really enjoyed reading the draft. There's some areas of concern, listing bar, and then the rubric. This is assignment 2, which was Word comments attached to it, or Blackboard comments, Blackboard as well, with the rubric as well. It's going to be tagged to specific components within the draft, showing them things where maybe I was confused in the reading process, or I needed to clarify a point more, or those key grammar things that, you know, keep coming up. And then the last one is the screencast feedback, which you saw with the rubric. And so I asked students some questions, and I don't have all of them here for the sake of time. But one of the questions I asked them was to consider all of the ways that other reviewers could provide feedback on their writing. Which one method did you most prefer? And so you can see that the video screencast received the highest mark. It was recorded as with 11. And then second was number 5, with 5 students responding. They like the type feedback and the comments that are either in Blackboard or in the document itself. And so I asked them why. Why did you like this one better? So here are some things that they wrote down in their perspectives from the survey, because it provides a thorough analysis of the students' work. So this is the video. Very helpful and overall very effective. I knew exactly where I did well and exactly where I needed to improve. This is the first time I received video feedback, and I really appreciate the time the instructor took to detail and highlight the errors. It made more sense to me to actually hear the comments associated with the errors. It kept me engaged. 5, the video feedback Screencast Professor Lancaster provided was the perfect means. It captured the fine details which I needed to improve. And the last one there, it says, I like the screencast comments. I get to hear the instructor's voice and understand the comments better. And here's some other ones. Again, just kind of reiterating the same thing. So this one was interesting because it said, I like to save it and go back to it without worrying about damaging it or losing it. So the student could see it once, kind of soak it in, and then I guess come back and look at it. Best explanation, best method of explaining corrections. I felt like it was more in depth. There's the visual and tactile learner. That's probably the one that kept asking me every time, can you do this again? Personally, I was able to better understand the instructor's point of view, hearing the discussion through the video recorded walkthrough of the feedback. So then for those who liked the comments in Microsoft Word, I like to see the comments next to my work, okay? It's easier for me to understand when it is written on each section. That way I know exactly where it went wrong. I don't have time to listen to comments. So this is one of the cons that we can talk about. With my work schedule and caring for kids, being able to quickly read through comments, edits, suggestions works better for me. Easy to understand and find in the paper, and then the fifth response did not provide any feedback there. I also asked them how many times you viewed the screencast. So most of them watched it at least one time. A few, 2 times, and then 3 people 3 times, and there was one that was more than 3, he or she 8 times. So I don't know why that person watched it 8 times, and this is where I wish I had some follow-up because it's an anonymous survey, I don't know. But it could have been, there could have been a technology issue, it could have been something specific, it could have been the student was struggling with a concept and kept going back and forth and watching it. So I don't know yet. I guessed if they started, stopped, or paused the screencast, and I had 14 of them say yes, okay? And the others no, so they just watched it straight through. And this is important to me because I wanted to know why they paused it. What were they looking at? What kind of feedback were they getting at that time? So they stopped, they pulled up the document on their laptop. So they watched it, and then at that moment they decided I need to look at my draft, address the changes within the assignment. So immediately getting in there and making corrections. I did not want to miss out on the fine details. To go over a certain point more in depth, so that might have been a stop, rewind, play a couple times. I didn't understand something, so I paused and played back to hear it again to compare corrections with my current draft. Okay, so the student had already gone into the revision process and wanted to go now and see did he or she address the things that I said needed to be addressed. To edit my new rough draft. I took a short break, looked at my own paper, to read what I had written, to look at the paper, and then this one at the end there was to take notes. So where I see further research forming out of this experience. Screencast analytics, can we measure if or what students are viewing in the drafts, right? Because this feedback, we spend a lot of time focusing on certain things that may not be really important to them. And if we can find out what kinds of things they are honing in on, it could maybe inform teaching practices in terms of writing, what kind of feedback we give. Can we measure hotspots for repeat viewing to see if there's viewing patterns? So I have, I suspect, although I have no data yet to back this up, I do have some ESL students that I think are probably hanging on to more of the grammatical type things versus the higher order concerns. This is a hypothesis I'm forming, so I don't know yet. And then efficacy of screencast feedback approach. So measuring their preferences. What kinds of feedback are they liking? What types of information are they looking for? Measure their perceptions of the screencast feedback approach to offer the more personalized experiences with that rich, contextualized, and sensory feedback. So at this point, though, where I'm at is looking at just my own data. I'm hoping to partner with some other instructors, not just in writing fields, but in other fields, to say, are you getting the same results? Are you seeing an immediate response from students who are engaging with you at a different level? Because I can tell you how many times I send out stuff and I don't hear anything back when it's just written comments. This, for some reason, seems to solicit some sort of response. So as a medium, it shows both strengths and weaknesses in the students' writing. And as a message, it shows them what I'm feeling, seeing, reading, and experiencing as I am engaging with their writing and with their ideas. So here's an example from a couple years back where I did have some analytics on a program called MediaSite. And it will record when a student views something. If the student stops and responds and backs it up, it gets hotter. So those red spots are somewhere on the video timeline that the student rewound and played. So the hotter it gets, it's showing me that there's something on the timeline right there at 57.07. I can go back to the screen and actually see what it was I said to the student, and then I could collect data that way. So this was just to give me a picture of something. What's also very interesting is that most of them do not watch the entire video. And I have found that at about 6 minutes, they drop off. So I have some consistent data to show that. I'm thinking, well, okay, so I need to create my videos probably within about 6 minutes because I'm losing their attention after that.
Amber,
Yes.
what does the current body of literature look like on this, or is it still pretty new?
It's still pretty new. There's actually a lot in other fields, surprisingly, and not so much in composition studies and tech comm studies. So I found there's a lot in just online learning in general, psychology classes, there's some in mass communication classes, computer science classes. So there's a lot of stuff out there on it, and I don't think it's kind of coming together yet as a body of research. So it's very new. Yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, the technology with the video. I was just wondering if you know of, you had quite a few people that left the written comments as well. And I was just wondering if the video would eventually start transcribing those two comments as well, and then you could get the best of both worlds.
There is a transcription capability in the video or in the software that I hope to show you today, but it's more, it's like closed captioning. But what I typically do is I pair the two together. So what I do the draft review, and I want to walk you through that process here in a minute. I might tag certain things and put comments in them, and then do the video. And so they get the draft as well as the video, so that they can go back and read the comments. So one of the things that you can see here from a student perspective, obviously in terms of pros, is that they've mentioned, I can hear you, I can see you, I can see clearly what you're pointing out and where I need to improve. Some of the other feedback though I've gotten is, you know, once I watched it one time, I didn't want to go back and watch it again. So when I was doing my revisions, I didn't want to go back and find that one thing you said, because I'd have to watch the entire video through the whole process.
Have you ever had students use YouTube's ability to play it like faster?
No, not to my knowledge. But what's really cool now, there is some software, of course you have to pay for it, that creates chapters. Okay, so I can put tags in them. That's what MediaSite will do. And I think Camtasia, you can do that as well. So you can tag the timeline, and then they can jump to those tags. So if I wanted to be perhaps a little bit more savvy, I could tag certain things like this is a grammar, this is a cohesion coherence type thing, or this is a doc design element or something like that. So then they could actually jump to them and look at those in isolation versus having to watch the entire video from beginning to end. I think from my perspective, again, it's been interesting to see the responses that students have to these. I'd like to do more research and see if it continues, or with other instructors, if they're getting the same kind of responses. It can be time consuming, and like I said in the beginning, I was trying to be maybe too perfect. And so I spent a lot of time creating the video, and then back then I had to render the video, and it took a while. So there's some software now that the rendering process is really easy. It doesn't take as long. I mean, back in 2011 when I was doing Camtasia, it took like half an hour to 45 minutes to render, and so you know you're kind of frozen with where you are in your grading process. So but let me ask, in terms of applications to other disciplines, I know that we are not all from writing backgrounds or communication backgrounds, and I'm just curious to see where ideas are forming in your head about where you might be able to use this or how you might be able to use this.
Yeah, so it appears to me that each session is like a miniature lecture that you record.
It is. I would say it's probably more parallel with writing conferences that we have in our field. So if a student wanted to meet with you in your office hours, you would have a one-on-one with that student about his or her assignment. So I think that is parallel to that kind of.
And also, how, in terms of recording the screen, how different is it from Camtasia?
Well, I'm going to show you Screencast-O-Matic, and it's actually fairly simple. And there's another one, Jing, if you've ever played with Jing. And I actually, on the handout on the other side of it, it has those some information there about the Screencast-O-Matic. But there are some pros and cons. So it depends on obviously budget. So Camtasia, as an educator, it's $139 for the software. Jing is free. There are some limitations. You only get 5 minutes of recording. So that might work for my data showing that they lose after 6 minutes. So it might force you to kind of, be concise and really hone the things that would be of critical concern for future drafting or for improving their skills. The Screencast-O-Matic is free, and there is a paid version. It's $15 a year, and there's added features to that I can share with you.
I was going to say that my students complete many APA-style papers
Uh-huh.
courses, and I do provide track changes and comments, in MS Word, which they do appreciate, but I think that this will really help many of them, quite honestly.
I have showed them how to do hanging indentation.
Right,
Right,
exactly.
like those kinds of things that they don't know how to necessarily manipulate the tools, that just telling them, you need to put a hanging indentation here,
Right.
they're just like, I still don't know what that is. So being able to show them, grab this and slide the indentation tab over is helpful.
My concern is that once you do this, then one of their comments on your IDA is going to be, why didn't she do, Dr. Lancaster needs to do this for every assignment.
Right. Well, and I think what I let them know that I use this as a tool in certain situations, because I think that there are certain kinds of assignments that you probably wouldn't want to use this for. So.
I do simulations online. So they'll go to industrial leaders that conduct those simulations. And at the end of the day, they have to form their own simulation and create it. So just trying to figure out how that might work. And I can see what you've shown that it would work well. Although I probably will need some.
They be giving you a video?
They actually create a simulation. We've done it with presents and stuff like that.
Okay.
Where it kind of sends you here, sends you there. It's very much in line with our national board exams that they take for respiratory therapy. So they take a written exam, and then they have to take a second exam, which is they call it clinical simulations. And so what I'm trying to do is have them not only go through those systems, but then create at least one by the end of the term. So then they know how to approach it better when they actually take that NBRC exam.
Did you find that you were usually just bringing up their assignment and talking about it, or did you do like you say here and you had to bring up maybe some websites too?
I do both. So if I see like the pattern error, I might go to like the Purdue OWL website and pull that up, or I use APA blog a lot where I'm showing them, okay, you've got an article and there's kind of weird thing here, you don't need the retrieval date, here's the link for this. And so I pull those up as well.
Pretty much a little each then.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you think
So
you
it's
could-
customized though to each student.
Do you think you could give the feedback in like, let's say 5 minutes?
I have, yeah, I've got several that are under 5 to 4 minutes. It just depends on, sometimes the ones that are a little bit more sticky need more help. So I do spend a little bit more time with those drafts.
The bulk, you think you could get it done in 5?
I think so, yeah,
Because I'm the Blackboard administrator on Janelle Nags,
yes.
and just today I got an update on a new Blackboard version that we might be able to go to. And they've included audio and video recording feedback
Nice.
within the assignment. I haven't got to see it yet, 'cause it just got released, so I'm gonna get it on my test server and check it out.
I'm gonna.
But it is limited to
you.
5 minutes, it said, and I don't know what it lets you bring up. If it's only the assignment, just your face. So
Okay.
I gotta try it out, but there's something I'm gonna check testing out, and it would be included for free. And they store it on another server, so it doesn't take up Blackboard space. And they said it'd be unlimited for now, but if it gets crazy use, they might limit us at some point.
Okay,
So that's.
that's exciting.
It works.
Do you know if it has any analytics?
I don't know about
Oh, yeah,
that yet,
okay.
'cause I haven't got to see it at all. But that's good, looks like it's mentioned,
Okay.
that's good to see.
Do we have any online folks having questions or comments? They want to chime in?
Yeah, I just
I
got, I
I
asked.
got a,
Okay, go ahead, Brian.
I have a question and or comment. I teach mechanical engineering and I teach a program called AutoCAD, so doing drawings. And in the old days, they just gave me a print and I just go and put down all the notes, but now they're also making them through Blackboard. doing all Blackboard comments take me a lot of typing to do, and this would seem, I could just be going through, oh, I should do this and this and this, and tell them just my words as I'm grading this, I was grading this and this and that. That's something possible that can be
Yeah,
used?
anything will be on your screen.
Okay.
I'll show you how you record
Okay,
it.
so we work with a
It works
commercial,
with
like
anything,
AutoCAD or something?
yeah.
Okay.
I haven't tried it for something like a hard object. So if you are creating models or prototypes, I think it could probably work in a different way. I mean, you would have to use a camera, dust camera
Sure.
or something.
Instead of having your face show the eye.
Exactly,
contact.
right. Mhm.
So we.
Oh, we do have some online folks that want to chime in.
This is Grant. I wrote something, but maybe I could ask the question directly. I record my videos using Camtasia, and I like that a lot. And I offer more feedback than my students ever want on my papers. And I'm wondering, rather than writing more than they do in the papers, would you see video feedback as an alternative to that? Because I really don't want to do both. I spend a long time giving feedback on every single paper, and to also add the video stuff, it kind of makes sense. I like the idea of it, but I really wouldn't want to do both. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure, honestly, to answer how I would answer that. I think I would want to see how you're using the feedback. Like, what are the students getting from the feedback? Are you doing it in a drafting stage, or, I mean, it sounds
No,
like
these are weekly assignments. I torture them mercilessly. They have to write a lot, and they have to write clearly, and they have to, so my feedback is usually more Klingon-like. It's very guttural, and I just tell them what they didn't do right. I don't have enough time to love on them too much, I guess. But I like the idea of the audio because I have such a melodic AM kind of voice that I'm sure that would soothe them. But I spend 3 days of my week grading papers, and I don't think I could do both. Recording the videos for the lectures takes a long time, as you know.
Right.
To edit the audio and just to do all the editing, it takes a long time. But, and I have to do the closed caption there as well. So I'm loath to do both. So I guess maybe I'll not ask the question if you don't really hadn't had experience there.
I would say for my field, because it's focused on the writing, they need to have both. But I think in other disciplines, maybe it's not as important to focus on the specifics of the writing. If it's commentary about subject matter expertise, or if it's commentary on executing, some sort of framework or theoretical idea, I think that might work. I think it just depends on what kind of feedback you're giving. So sometimes I want to talk to the student first and say hi, who I am, and then turn off my camera and dive into their documents. I kind of do it in different ways. You can do it where your image floats over the screen, so anywhere on there. And during the editing process, you can also turn off that floating screen. So if you find like it's covering something that you really want them to see, you can actually turn that off at that point on the timeline. So I do have a fake draft, and it's one of my own, so I can, make fun of it. It's not this draft. But I've gone back and I've highlighted things, and this is how I would approach creating the screencast. So I can see that here I have, my sound is recording. If you wanted to record audio of the computer, meaning maybe you have a PowerPoint that the student is doing, and you want to present their piece to show them where they messed up, right? So if you're doing an oral presentation in your class and you want to point out something, you can actually let it play their voice through, and it'll record their voice playing. Similarly, if you have YouTube video or something you want to show them something, it'll play the sound back in it. So it'll record that through the video, through the screencast. So I just click record, and it's going to count down to 3. And so I usually start by just pointing out. So I've highlighted a few things in the draft, and I added some things that I think would be again, clarification points or where you might need to come back to and think about revising. So in this case here, I think the word interactive could really help clarify the kind of instruction. I enjoyed this point here that you made. I think that when they are grappling with complex rhetorical concepts is something that you want to highlight in this piece. Here, I think I consider changing this word for concision. We want to eliminate as much as we can, especially for a proposal that has to be under 150 words. So I worked through the draft and I put in things that have changed. And then when I'm done, I simply say that I'm done. I can start over if I want. And there's also features here if you wanted to add drawing. So you can actually click on this and then do some things with loose pencil type things. If you wanted to highlight or something like that, you can do that. But I'm going to hit done. And so now I'm in the editing mode, and you can see the timeline here. And I can tell there's a pause right here. So if I want to edit, there's different options here. If I want to do closed caption, I can do speech to text, and it's going to do that for me. If I have a script in place, I can load the script here. So I'm going to do speech to text. It's going to take just a few minutes, and it's going to convert all my talking.
Does it have to be trained?
No,
Is it really accurate?
most of the time.
And you can go back and edit the parts.
You sure can.
Cool.
Okay, so here's the first one. Let's see how it goes. I usually I'm just pointing out, and I add some things that I think would be in a clarification point. So there's some of that awkwardness there, and I could go in and definitely change the text, see? So I can clean it up as I'm going, okay? So I'm gonna assume that everything there is okay, just for the sake of time. Not that I do, but you can add music, okay? So if I wanted to, that's just for fun. Let's give it some chill. All right. So if I play this back now, this is what the students can see. So I'm gonna hit pause, and I can see right here, I mean, you can play around with music and stuff, it's fun. But I can see right here, like there's a gap, and so I want that out of there just because I need to cut my timeline. So I simply hit the cursor right in front of it, I hit cut, I drag it to the end, I hit OK. Oops, I lost my drag. There we go. And it's gone. So it's fairly easy. So once I have my narrative and it's all done, I hit done. And it's going to ask me, if you don't have the profile, it's not going to be able to upload it, but you can also download it as a MP4 file, which then I upload to Blackboard. So in this case, I do have an account for $15 a month. I'm going to say, this is student 1, hit publish, and watch how fast that rendering processes usually. So I can say continue in the background, it's going to do its thing while I move on to the next draft. And so it's allowing me to do multitasking and doing things. Whereas with Camtasia, I found I couldn't touch it while it was rendering. Although this was a while back, so I don't know if Camtasia is different. So it creates a link, and I can send that student a direct link in Blackboard, and then they can watch it to the screencast. So if I click OK, and now it's going to take me to my recordings. There's the recording. So I can go back and edit it again if I find something I didn't like about it. Or I can do raw first, do all of my students' drafts, and then come back and edit later if I want to.
can you take breaks from your monthly payments within the year? Like say I've got a term that I'm teaching and then there's a term that I'm not teaching. Is it like a month to month or you?
It's $15 for the year, the one-time
Oh, for
renewal.
the year?
$15 for the year.
Oh, okay. I thought you said a month.
No,
A moment ago.
well, there's also pro hosting, so if you wanted to do, actual hosting, there is a monthly fee for that.
Okay,
But I find for most parts that this is enough for me in terms of what I need. Yeah,
thank you.
so,
Amber,
yes.
and how do you give the student access to that?
Okay, so from here, I want to go back to manage recordings. Let's see. Actually, let me jump over here. Okay. So I take that link, I just copy and paste it into Blackboard.
Nice.
Now you can put passwords on them, so they have to have the unique link and the password in order to view it. So that gives them a little bit more security.